I stepped off the plane after a grueling 13-week contract in the scorching Arizona heat, dreaming only of the silence of my own bed. My body ached from 12-hour shifts in the ICU, where I spent my days keeping strangers alive and my nights trying to forget the ones we lost. But when the Uber pulled up to the secure storage lot where I paid $500 a month to keep my life safe, my parking spot was empty. There was no storm damage and no police tape, just a pile of pulverized steel where my heavy-duty chains used to be. The panic hit me like a physical blow to the chest, and I dialed my mother, expecting her to be worried sick that my property had been stolen while I was serving the community. But Susan laughed when she heard my frantic voice. "Oh, Harper, you are back early," she chirped. "Do not bother going to the lot because Frank and I hauled that big camper over to our place for Jared. Kayla is due any day now, and they need a proper home, not that dump of an apartment. You are the big sister, so you need to learn to share." She was talking about my custom design Class A motorhome worth $150,000 as if it were a bag of old clothes she had donated to charity without asking. "I want to ask you a serious question right now. What would you do if the people who were supposed to protect you decided that your most valuable asset was public property just because you are single? Would you call the police on your own flesh and blood, or would you let them get away with it to keep the peace? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, because I had to make a choice that changed everything." The taxi driver was staring at me in the rearview mirror as I stood frozen on the asphalt with my phone pressed to my ear. He asked if I needed a ride somewhere else, but I could barely hear him over the roaring in my ears. That RV was not just a vehicle to me. It was the only home I had. 3 years ago, I sold my condo and committed to the life of a travel nurse. I took the highest-paying crisis contracts in the most understaffed hospitals across the country. I worked through holidays and missed birthdays and slept in parking lots during snowstorms to save every penny. I put all of that blood money into that vehicle. It had a queen-size bed with a memory foam mattress that was the only thing that helped my bad back. It had a custom filtration system because I had developed severe asthma from prolonged exposure to hospital chemicals. It was my sanctuary. It was the one place in the world where I did not have to take care of anyone but myself. And now my mother was telling me she had given it to Jared. Jared was 27 years old and had never held a job for longer than 6 months. He was the golden child, the boy who could do no wrong, even when he was doing everything wrong. When we were kids, if Jared broke a window, it was because the glass was too fragile. If he failed a test, it was because the teacher did not like him. While I was working double shifts at a diner to pay for nursing school, Jared was crashing the car my parents bought him and expecting a new one the next day. And he always got it. My father, Frank, believed that a man needed support to find his footing. But Jared was not finding his footing. He was finding new ways to gamble away my parents' retirement fund. Last year, they bailed him out of a failed vape shop business that lasted 3 months. This year, he had gotten his girlfriend Kayla pregnant, and suddenly his irresponsibility was reframed as a family emergency that required everyone to pitch in. I gripped the phone tighter, feeling the plastic case creak under the pressure. I told my mother that I was coming over there right now to get my keys. Susan sighed loudly as if I were the one being unreasonable. She told me not to make a scene because stress was bad for the baby. She said that since I was single and made so much money as a nurse, I could easily afford a hotel or a short-term rental. She said the RV was just sitting there gathering dust while I was away, so it made sense for someone to use it. Her logic was twisted and suffocating. In her mind, my success was a communal resource pool that she could dip into whenever her precious son made a mistake. She did not see the hours I stood on my feet. She only saw the paycheck and the shiny assets. I got back into the taxi and gave the driver my parents' address. My hands were shaking so badly I could hardly buckle my seatbelt. I thought about the interior of my RV. I had white leather seats that I cleaned meticulously every week. I had a collection of expensive medical reference books stored in the overhead bins. I had my emergency cash stash hidden in the false bottom of the pantry. The thought of Jared and his rowdy friends inside my sanctuary made me feel physically ill. Jared was a slob. He smoked despite knowing about my asthma. He left trash wherever he went because he grew up with a mother who followed him around with a dustpan. The drive to the suburbs took 40 minutes, and every minute felt like an hour. I tried to calm myself down. I tried to think like a nurse, triage the situation, assess the damage, and formulate a plan. But the rage was overriding my professional training. This was not a medical emergency. This was a theft. My parents had hired a locksmith to break into my property. They had towed it without my consent. In any other context, this would be a felony. But because we shared DNA, they thought it was just a family favor. I looked out the window as we turned onto their street. It was a nice neighborhood with manicured lawns and American flags waving on porches. It was the picture of suburban respectability. Then I saw it. My beautiful sleek silver home on wheels was parked diagonally across my parents' front lawn, crushing Susan's prize-winning hydrangeas. It looked like a beached whale. An ugly orange extension cord was snake-like running from the garage into the side of my RV. The awning was fully extended, and I could see smoke billowing out from underneath it. Someone was grilling. On my property. The taxi driver slowed down and asked if this was the place. I told him yes. I paid him and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The smell of cheap burgers and stale beer hit me instantly. I could hear music thumping from inside the vehicle. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and they were throwing a party in the home I had built with my own sweat and tears. I marched up the driveway, my suitcase rolling behind me like an anchor. I was not just a sister coming to visit. I was a storm making landfall. I stood at the edge of the driveway watching the smoke from the charcoal grill curl around the silver exterior of my home. The smell of lighter fluid and cheap hamburger meat was nauseating, but it was the sight of Kayla that made my stomach turn. My sister-in-law was sitting on a folding chair propped up against the side of the RV. She was 8 months pregnant and looked exhausted, but that did not excuse what she was doing. In her hand was one of my monogrammed Egyptian cotton bath towels. I had bought those towels in a boutique in Charleston during a particularly lonely assignment as a small treat for myself. They cost $60 each. And right now Kayla was using one of them to wipe the mud off her sneakers. She scrubbed the white fabric against the rubber sole, leaving thick brown streaks across the embroidery of my initials. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run over there and snatch it from her hands. But my feet felt like they were encased in concrete. This paralysis was a familiar sensation. It was the same feeling I had when I was 16 years old watching my father hand Jared the keys to a brand new sedan while I walked 3 miles to the bus stop for my shift at the diner. It was the conditioning of a lifetime. I had been trained like a dog to accept that Jared's comfort was the priority, and my role was to facilitate it. If I complained, I was selfish. If I cried, I was dramatic. If I worked hard and bought nice things for myself, I was rubbing it in their faces. Jared came out of the RV holding a beer. He was wearing a tank top, and I could see he had gained weight. He looked soft and unbothered. He laughed at something one of his friends said and slapped the side of my RV with his open palm. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet suburban afternoon. That slap was a claim of ownership. He did not care that he had not paid a dime for it. He did not care about the credit score I had built or the overtime I had worked. To him, the world was a vending machine, and our parents had given him the master key. I closed my eyes for a second, letting the memories of the past decade wash over me. It was important to remember why I was standing here shaking instead of calling the police immediately. I needed to remember the guilt. My mother, Susan, was a master of weaponizing guilt. She had crafted a narrative where I was the cold, unfeeling career woman, and Jared was the sensitive, misunderstood boy who just needed a break. When I graduated from nursing school with honors, my parents did not come to the ceremony. Jared had been arrested for shoplifting that same morning, and they said they had to be at the station to support him. I accepted my diploma alone. I took myself out to dinner alone. And when I called them later that night hoping for a congratulations, my father Frank told me I was insensitive for talking about my success when the family was in crisis. That was the dynamic. My success was an insult to Jared's failures. When I bought my first car, a sensible used hatchback, my mother asked me why I did not buy something nicer so I could drive Jared to his court dates in style. When I started travel nursing and making significant money, they did not ask about the stress of the ICU or the patients I lost. They asked how much the bonus was. They asked if I could cover the property tax this year because business was slow. They asked if I could lend Jared $5,000 for a landscaping business that turned out to be a pyramid scheme. I always said yes. I said yes because I wanted them to love me. I said yes because I thought that if I paid enough, I could buy my way into the favor that Jared received for free. But the price of admission kept going up. 6 months ago, when I was in Texas, my mother called me crying. She said Jared and Kayla were being evicted because of a misunderstanding with the landlord. The truth, which I found out later, was that Jared had punched a hole in the drywall and refused to pay for it. Mom begged me to co-sign a lease for them. She said no one else would help. She said I was the only one with good credit. I refused. It was the first time I had ever said no to a major financial request. I told her that I enabled him enough. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. For 3 weeks, they did not speak to me. They ignored my texts. They blocked me on social media. It was the punishment for disobedience. And it worked. The isolation was agonizing. I spent my nights in a hotel room wondering if I had been too harsh, wondering if I was a bad sister. So when I came home for Christmas, I brought gifts. Expensive gifts. I paid off my mother's credit card bill. I gave my father a new set of golf clubs. I tried to buy my way back in. And they accepted it. They smiled and hugged me, and for a few hours I felt like part of the family again. But now, looking at my RV hijacked on their lawn, I realized those gifts were just tribute payments. They did not love me for coming back. They loved me for what I brought. And when I stopped bringing enough, they decided to just take it. I took a deep breath and walked up the driveway. The gravel crunched loudly under my boots. Kayla looked up first. Her eyes went wide when she saw me. She dropped the muddy towel on the grass and nudged Jared. Jared turned around. He did not look scared. He did not look guilty. He looked annoyed. He looked like a teenager whose mom had walked in on him playing video games instead of doing homework. "Hey Harper," he said, his voice slurring slightly. "You are back early. Mom said you would be gone another week." I stopped 10 feet away from them. I looked at the extension cord. I looked at the grill. I looked at the scratch on the side of the vehicle where they had clearly dragged something heavy against the paint. "What are you doing, Jared?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and adrenaline. "Why is my home parked on Mom and Dad's lawn? And why do you have the keys?" Jared took a sip of his beer and shrugged. "Ask Dad," he said casually. "He handled the logistics. I just needed a place for Kayla. You know how it is. The baby needs stability. We could not stay at the motel anymore. It was gross." "So you decided to steal my house," I said, the volume of my voice rising. "Borrow, Harper, borrow," Jared corrected me, rolling his eyes. "Jesus, why are you always so dramatic? You are not even using it. It was just sitting in a lot costing money. Dad said it was a waste. We are doing you a favor, really. Keeping the engine running, keeping the pipes from freezing. Doing me a favor." He was standing there drinking beer on a Tuesday afternoon while his pregnant girlfriend destroyed my linen, and he claimed he was doing me a favor. The entitlement was so absolute, it was almost impressive. I walked past him toward the door of the RV. I needed to see the inside. I needed to know the extent of the damage. "Whoa, hold on," Jared said, stepping in front of me, blocking the stairs. "You cannot go in there right now. It is a mess. We are still unpacking. Plus, Kayla is resting. You cannot just barge into someone else's home." "Someone else's home?" I laughed. It was a sharp, hysterical sound that made Kayla flinch. "It is my home, Jared. My name is on the title. My money paid for it. Get out of my way." I tried to step around him, but he grabbed my arm. His grip was tight, bruising. "Do not be a bitch, Harper," he hissed, his face suddenly close to mine. "Do not ruin this for me. Dad said I could stay here. Dad is the head of this family. If you have a problem, take it up with him. But you are not going inside and stressing out Kayla." I looked down at his hand on my arm. This was new. He had stolen from me before. He had lied to me. He had insulted me. But he had never touched me. He had never physically blocked me from my own property. This was the escalation I should have seen coming. The moment he realized he could take the big things without consequence was the moment he stopped fearing me entirely. "Let go of me," I said quietly. "Or what?" Jared challenged, sneering. "You will call the cops. Go ahead. Tell them you are kicking your pregnant sister-in-law out on the street. See who the bad guy is then. Dad already told the neighbors you gave it to us. Everyone thinks you are the generous aunt. You want to go around telling everyone Dad is a liar." He knew exactly where to hit. He knew my weakness was my reputation and my desperate need to protect the family image. He was betting on my silence. He was betting that I would swallow this injustice just like I swallowed the student loans and the credit card debt and the emotional neglect. But he forgot one thing. He forgot that I was an ICU nurse. I dealt with trauma every day. I dealt with people at their worst. And I knew how to stop a bleed. At that moment, the front door of the main house opened. My father Frank walked out. He was wearing his slippers and a cardigan, looking every bit the retired suburban grandfather. He saw us standing by the RV, saw Jared gripping my arm, and he did not yell at Jared. He yelled at me. "Harper," Frank boomed, his voice carrying across the lawn. "Stop harassing your brother. Get inside the house. We need to talk about your attitude." I looked at my father. Then I looked at Jared. I yanked my arm free from his grip. I did not go into the house. I turned back to the RV door. "I am checking my vehicle," I said firmly. "And if anything is missing, Jared, you are going to pay for it." I pushed past him before he could react. I climbed the steps. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I reached for the handle, praying it was unlocked because I did not have my keys. It opened. And the smell hit me first. Stale smoke. Spilled beer. And something else. The smell of filth. I stepped inside. And my heart stopped. The interior of my RV was designed to be a sterile sanctuary. I had spent thousands of dollars installing a hospital-grade air filtration system because my asthma was triggered by smoke and dust. I had chosen white leather upholstery not because I was vain, but because it was easy to clean and sanitize after a long shift in a germ-filled hospital. But as I stood in the entryway, the first thing that hit me was the smell. It was a thick, cloying mixture of stale cigarette smoke, fried grease, and the sour odor of spilled beer. My chest tightened immediately. My lungs began to seize in protest against the very air inside my own home. I stepped onto the floor. The custom beige carpeting, which I had imported and treated with stain-resistant coating, was unrecognizable. There were dark, muddy boot prints stamped all over it, like a trail of destruction leading from the door to the kitchenette. A sticky brown puddle, likely cola or old coffee, had pooled near the driver's seat and dried into a crusty stain. I looked at the dashboard. My GPS system, a high-end Garmin unit specifically designed for large vehicles, was gone. In its place was a gaping hole with wires dangling out like severed veins. I walked further into the living area. The white leather sofa where I used to sit and read medical journals was covered in clothes. Not just clean clothes, but dirty laundry. Boxers, socks, and stained t-shirts were strewn across the cushions. I reached out to move a pile of jeans and stopped. There was a burn mark. A perfectly round black crater in the center of the pristine white leather. Someone had put a cigarette out on my $4,000 sofa. My vision blurred. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the counter to stay upright. This was not just messy. This was a violation. It was a deliberate desecration of everything I had worked for. I looked at the kitchenette. The sink was full of dirty dishes that had been there long enough for mold to grow on the leftover food. The granite countertop was covered in empty beer cans and fast food wrappers. But the real horror was yet to come. I turned toward the back of the RV where I kept my sleeping quarters and my workspace. I had a locking cabinet installed near the bed. It was reinforced steel bolted to the frame. Inside I kept my travel nursing equipment. My portable ultrasound machine, which cost $5,000. My specialized stethoscopes. My diagnostic kits. My emergency cash reserve. It was my livelihood locked away in that box. The door to the cabinet was hanging off its hinges. The metal around the lock was twisted and scarred as if someone had taken a crowbar to it. I looked inside. It was empty. The silence in the RV was broken by heavy footsteps behind me. I turned around. Jared was standing there picking his teeth with a fingernail. He looked around the room, ignoring the destruction as if it were normal. "Looking for your doctor toys?" he asked casually. I could not speak. I pointed a shaking finger at the broken cabinet. "Oh, that," Jared said, scratching his stomach. "Yeah, we had to clear that out. I needed the space for the baby-s stuff. We are going to put the crib right there once we get the money." "Clear it out," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the wheezing in my chest. "Jared, that was $15,000 worth of medical equipment." "Where is it?" Jared shrugged. "I pawned it." "Well, most of it." "I sold the ultrasound thing to a guy I know from the gym. He runs a dog breeding business or something. He gave me $2,000 for it." "Good deal, right?" $2,000. He sold a $5,000 machine for $2,000 to a dog breeder. I felt the blood drain from my face. My knees gave way and I sank onto the edge of the ruined sofa. You sold my equipment. You broke into a locked safe and stole my property. That is a felony, Jared. That is grand larceny. Jared rolled his eyes. He walked over to the fridge and pulled out a beer. Stop using those big legal words, Harper. It is not stealing. We are family. Dad said whatever is in this RV is fair game because you abandoned it. You left it in a parking lot for 3 months. What did you expect? Besides, I needed the money. Do you know how much diapers cost? Do you know how much a crib costs? You have plenty of money. You can just buy new stuff. You are rich. He popped the tab on the beer and took a long swig. The sound of the carbonation fizzing was the only sound in the room for a moment. He truly believed it. He truly believed that my property was his reserve fund. He believed that because I had money, I had no right to be angry about theft. I looked at him. I really looked at him. For years, I had seen him as a screw-up. A hapless kid who just made bad choices. But now I saw him for what he was. He was a predator. He was a parasite who would consume everything I had until there was nothing left, and then he would blame me for running out. You are going to jail, I said, my voice steadying into a cold, hard tone. I am calling the police and I am pressing charges. Jared laughed. He actually laughed. No, you are not. Mom would die. Dad would kill you. You are not going to send the father of your nephew to prison over some stupid machines. You are too soft, Harper. You always fold. At that moment, the door swung open again. Frank walked in. He had to duck his head to enter. He looked at the mess. He looked at the broken cabinet. Then he looked at me. What is going on in here? He demanded. Why are you upsetting Kayla? She can hear you shouting from the house. He stole my equipment, Dad, I said, standing up. He pried open my safe and sold my medical gear. He sold my ultrasound machine. Frank waved his hand dismissively. Oh, that. We talked about that. Jared asked me if he could clear out some clutter to make room for the nursery. I told him to go ahead. You told him to sell my property, I asked incredulously. I told him to make the space livable, Frank said, his voice rising. You were not using it. Those machines were just gathering dust. Jared has a baby coming. He needs cash for the preparation. We are a family, Harper. We pool our resources. Why are you so obsessed with money? It is unbecoming of a woman. Obsessed with money. I worked 80 hours a week. I stood on my feet until they bled. I saved lives. And he called me obsessed with money because I did not want my brother to steal the tools of my trade. I looked at the table near the kitchenette. In the chaos, I had missed something. There was a stack of papers sitting under an ashtray. I walked over and picked them up. Frank moved to stop me, but he was too slow. I read the document on top. It was a DMV form. An application for a duplicate title. And below that was a transfer of ownership form. It was filled out. My name was forged at the bottom. The signature looked nothing like mine. It looked like a child's attempt at cursive. I looked up at Frank holding the paper in the air. You were not just borrowing it, I said. You were trying to transfer the title. You were trying to steal the RV legally. Frank's face turned a deep shade of red. He did not look ashamed. He looked angry that he had been caught. It is for insurance purposes, he shouted. If Jared is living here, the vehicle needs to be in his name. It is the law, Harper. I was trying to protect you from liability. You forged my signature, I said. That is fraud. That is another felony. Frank stepped closer to me. He was a big man. He used his size to intimidate. He had done it my whole life. He loomed over me, his face inches from mine. Give me that paper, he growled. I folded the paper and shoved it into the pocket of my scrub pants. No, I said. This is evidence. Frank grabbed my shoulder. His fingers dug into my trapezius muscle, right where I carried all my stress. Give it to me, Harper. Do not make me hurt you. Jared was watching from the kitchenette, drinking his beer, grinning. He was enjoying this. He liked seeing me put in my place. I looked at my father's hand on my shoulder. I looked at his eyes. There was no love there. There was no fatherly affection. There was only the desperate need to control. He was not protecting his son because he loved him. He was protecting his son because Jared was an extension of himself, and my independence was a threat to his authority. I realized then that I had no parents. I had been an orphan for a long time. I just had not admitted it to myself until now. The people standing in front of me were not family. They were strangers who shared my last name and felt entitled to my blood. I shrugged his hand off. It took effort. He was strong. "Get out," I said. Frank laughed. "Get out. This is my property. You're parked on my land." "I am leaving," I said. "And I am taking my home with me. Tell Jared to get his pregnant girlfriend and his trash out of my RV. You have 10 minutes. Frank crossed his arms. "No. You're not going anywhere." I put a boot on the wheel. "You cannot drive this thing. And if you try to call a tow truck, I will tell them you are trespassing. Now give me the keys and get out of my sight before I really lose my temper." I looked at Jared. He was smirking. I looked at Frank. He was glaring. They thought they had one. They thought they had me trapped. They had the vehicle immobilized. They had the physical advantage. They had the emotional leverage. But they forgot one thing. I was a travel nurse. I lived on the road. And I prepared for everything. I did not need a tow truck. And I did not need their permission. I reached into my pocket and touched the small panic button on my key fob. It was a feature I had installed for safety when sleeping in remote areas. A silent alarm that did not just make noise. It sent a distress signal directly to the local police dispatch with my GPS coordinates and a code that indicated a carjacking in progress. I had pressed it 3 minutes ago when I saw the burn on the sofa. I looked at the clock on the wall. The response time in this suburb was usually under 5 minutes. "I have to get something from the bedroom," I said, lying smoothly. My voice was calm now. The panic was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical determination. I walked past Frank, avoiding his grasp, and went into the bedroom. I needed to secure the evidence. And I needed to be away from the door when the police arrived. The bedroom of my RV was my final sanctuary, but even here the air was heavy with the scent of cheap perfume and sweat. I sat on the edge of my bed holding the forged title documents in my hand. Outside I could hear Frank and Jared laughing. They sounded so confident. They sounded like they had already won. I looked at the small monitor mounted on the wall above my dresser. It was part of the hidden security system I had installed after a close call at a truck stop in New Mexico. Frank and Jared did not know about the cameras. They did not know that every word they said, every shove, every threat was being recorded in high definition and uploaded to a cloud server. I watched the screen. Frank was leaning against the kitchenette counter, gesturing with a beer bottle. Jared was sitting on the ruined sofa, feet up on the burn mark. "She will fold," Frank said, his voice muffled by the thin walls but clear on the monitor. "Harper always folds. She is a nurse. She has that caregiver complex. She cannot stand to see people suffer, especially not family. Once she calms down and sees the baby, she will sign the real papers. I will just tell her it is for the inheritance taxes or something. She is smart, but she is weak when it comes to us." Jared snickered. "I already found a buyer for the vehicle, Dad. A guy in Nevada. He does not care about the title being a duplicate. He will give us $80,000 in cash. That is enough to pay off my debts and get a down payment on a house. Harper can just buy another one. She makes more in a month than I make in a year. It is practically a charity donation at this point." Kayla walked into the frame. She looked at the mess inside. "Make sure she does not call the cops, Frank. If they see the inside, they might get suspicious about the medical gear." Frank waved a hand dismissively. "I told her the neighbors saw her give it to us. If she calls the cops, she looks like the villain. She cares too much about what people think. She will stay quiet. She always does." I watched them on the screen and felt something inside me break. It was not a painful break. It was clean and cold, like a snap of dry wood. For 30 years, I had carried the burden of their expectations. I had been the daughter who worked hard, the sister who bailed them out, the ATM that never said no. I had allowed them to treat me like a resource because I was afraid of being alone. I was afraid that if I did not provide for them, I would have no one. But as I watched my father plot to steal my entire future while laughing at my weakness, I realized I was already alone. I had been alone my whole life. They were not my family. They were a liability. I stood up and walked to the small built-in desk. I pulled out my laptop. My hands were perfectly steady. I was no longer the shaking girl in the driveway. I was a professional performing a triage on a dying relationship. I opened the security app and began clipping the footage. The forge of the signature. Frank grabbing my shoulder and threatening me. Jared admitting to selling $15,000 worth of medical equipment. The confession of their plan to sell the stolen vehicle in Nevada. It was all there. Clear. Irrefutable. I then opened my bank app. I looked at the joint account I shared with my mother. I had kept it open to help her with her medication and groceries. There was $12,000 in there. My money. I initiated a transfer to my private account immediately. If they were going to rob me, I was going to secure my assets first. The sound of a siren began to wail in the distance. It was faint at first, then louder. I looked at the monitor. Frank froze. Jared stood up, dropping his beer can. The blue and red lights began to flash through the tinted windows of the RV. I walked out of the bedroom and back into the living area. Frank was already at the door, looking out through the small window. "Harper, what did you do?" Frank roared, turning to look at me. His face was twisted with fury. "Did you call the cops? After everything we have done for you? After we took in your property and looked after it?" I did not answer him. I just stood there watching him. Jared was frantic. He started grabbing his bag of dirty laundry. "We have to go, Dad. We have to get out of here. If they see the interior." "It is too late, Jared," I said. My voice was low and calm. It sounded strange even to me. I had pressed the silent alarm 10 minutes ago. They are not here for a noise complaint. They are here for a carjacking. Frank lunged at me. He was fast for his age. He reached for my throat, but I stepped back, using the narrow hallway to my advantage. I had spent years moving heavy patients and avoiding combative addicts in the ER. I knew how to move. I ducked under his arm and pushed him toward the sofa. "You ungrateful bitch," Frank screamed. "I am your father. I gave you life. And I gave you everything else," I said. "But the bank is closed, Dad." The door of the RV was kicked open from the outside. Two officers with their guns drawn but pointed at the floor stepped in. "Police. Hands where I can see them. Everyone stay exactly where you are." Frank immediately changed. His face went from rage to a mask of bewildered sorrow in a split second. He put his hands up and started shaking his head. "Officers, thank God you are here," he said, his voice cracking with fake emotion. "My daughter, she is having a breakdown. She is unstable. She just flew in from a high-stress job and she started attacking us. We were just trying to help her move her things." The lead officer, a man named Miller, looked at Frank, then at the ruined interior of the RV. He looked at the beer cans, the cigarette burns, and the broken safe. Then he looked at me. "Ma'am, are you Harper Rossi?" he asked. "I am," I said. "I am the owner of this vehicle. I reported it stolen from my storage lot 3 days ago. These people broke in and have been living here and destroying my property." Frank stepped forward. "That is a lie. She gave us the keys. She told us we could stay here until the baby was born. Ask the neighbors. Ask anyone." Officer Miller looked at the duplicate title form still sitting on the counter. He picked it up with a gloved hand. He looked at the forged signature, then at Frank. "This your handwriting, sir?" he asked. Frank stammered. "No, I was just helping her fill it out. She has shaky hands from the stress." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I turned the screen toward Officer Miller. It was the live feed from the bedroom camera showing the last 10 minutes of footage. I hit play on the clip where Frank grabbed me and threatened to hurt me if I did not give him the paper. "I have the entire incident on video," I said. "I have them admitting to stealing $15,000 in medical gear. I have them admitting to the plan to sell my RV in Nevada. And I have the locksmith's invoice where they paid to have my locks bypassed while I was in Arizona." Jared tried to bolt for the back window, but the second officer was on him in a second. He was slammed against the wall and handcuffed. Kayla started screaming in the driveway, claiming she was going into labor from the stress. It was a chaotic mess of lies and manipulation. But I did not feel bad. I did not feel the crushing weight of guilt that Susan had spent 30 years building inside me. I felt light. I felt like I was finally breathing clean air for the first time in my life. Officer Miller looked at Frank. "Sir, you are under arrest for grand larceny, fraud, and domestic assault." Frank looked at me. His eyes were full of a hatred so pure it was terrifying. "You are dead to me, Harper," he hissed as the handcuffs clicked shut. "You are no longer a Rossi. Do not ever come crawling back when you are old and alone." "I will be fine, Dad," I said, because for the first time I am the one holding the keys. The silence that followed the playing of the video was absolute. For a few seconds, the only sound in the RV was the hum of the refrigerator and the heavy, ragged breathing of my father. Officer Miller handed my phone back to me with a nod of respect. He had seen enough domestic disputes to know who was lying, but video evidence of a felony in progress was a gift he rarely received. He turned to his partner and gestured toward Frank. The motion was subtle but definitive. Frank realized it too. The arrogance that had defined him for my entire life evaporated instantly, leaving behind a terrified old man. He stepped back, bumping into the counter. "You cannot be serious," he stammered, his eyes darting between me and the officers. "It is a family dispute. She is overreacting. I am a respected member of this community. I am on the HOA board. You cannot arrest me in my own driveway." "You are not on your driveway, sir," Officer Miller said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You are inside a vehicle you do not own, and you just admitted on tape to forging a federal document and conspiring to sell stolen property. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." The click of the handcuffs on my father's wrists was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It sounded like justice. Jared, seeing his protector fall, tried to bargain. He started crying. It was a pathetic theatrical sobbing that I had seen 1,000 times before. He claimed he was pressured. He claimed he did not know it was illegal. He claimed he did it for the baby. "Shut up, Jared," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "You sold my ultrasound machine to a dog breeder. You knew exactly what you were doing." The police marched them out of the RV. I followed them down the steps. The scene outside was chaotic. The flashing lights had drawn a crowd. Neighbors were standing on their porches watching the spectacle. Mrs. Higgins from next door, who always praised Frank for his manicured lawn, was staring with her mouth open as the police guided Frank into the back of the cruiser. He kept his head down, trying to hide his face, but it was too late. His reputation, the one thing he valued more than his children, was shattered. Then the front door of the house flew open and Susan came running out. She was wearing her bathrobe and slippers, her hair a mess. She had been hiding inside, hoping Frank would handle it, but seeing her husband and son in handcuffs forced her into the light. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, grabbing Officer Miller's arm. "Let them go. This is a mistake. Harper, tell them it is a mistake. Tell them you gave us permission." Officer Miller gently but firmly removed her hand. "Mom, step back. These men are under arrest for grand larceny, fraud, and domestic assault. If you interfere, you will join them." Susan turned to me. Her face was a mask of betrayal. "How could you?" she whispered. "How could you do this to your own family? Your brother is about to be a father. Your father has high blood pressure. You are going to kill them." I looked at my mother. For years I had thought she was a victim of Frank's bullying, just like me. I thought she was powerless. But looking at her now defending the men who had robbed me, I realized she was the architect. She was the one who guilted me into giving money. She was the one who softened the blows for Jared, so he never learned a lesson. She was not a victim. She was the enabler in chief. "I did not do this, Mom," I said, my voice calm and steady. "They did. They stole my home. They destroyed my property. And you watched them do it. You laughed when I called you from the airport. Remember? You told me I had to share. Well, now they are sharing a cell." Susan collapsed onto the grass, weeping dramatically. Kayla was sitting on the curb, looking shell-shocked. She realized there was no house for her, no $80,000 from a sale in Nevada, and no rich sister-in-law to bail them out. I walked over to Officer Miller. "I need to file a full report," I said. "And I want a restraining order against all 3 of them." "We will take care of the paperwork at the station," Miller said. "We are going to impound the RV as evidence for a few days, but we will release it to you as soon as the crime scene tech is done." I watched the police cars drive away, carrying the 2 men who had made my life a misery for 29 years. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. But I was not done yet. There was one loose end. I turned back to Susan. She was still on the ground, sobbing into her hands. I walked over and stood above her. "Get up, Mom," I said. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. You have to drop the charges, Harper. Please. I will do anything. We will pay you back. I promise. We will pay back every cent. I laughed humorlessly. Pay me back. With what? Jared has no job. Frank just lost his reputation and likely his pension once the legal fees hit. And you? You have nothing because you let them spend it all. We have the house, she said, desperate hope in her voice. We have equity. I looked at the house. It was a nice house. 4 bedrooms. A big yard. It was the house where I was raised to feel like a second-class citizen. Yes, you do, I said. And that is exactly how you are going to fix this. I pulled out my phone and opened the calculator app. I started listing the numbers out loud. The damage to the RV interior is at least $20,000. The stolen medical equipment is $15,000. The legal fees I am about to incur will be another $10,000. Plus the $12,000 I transferred from our joint account, which covers the loan I gave Jared last year that he never paid back. Susan stared at me confused. What are you saying? I am saying that this is not a negotiation, Mom, I said, crouching down so I was eye level with her. I am going to sue you. I am going to sue Frank and Jared in civil court for damages, emotional distress, and theft. With the criminal conviction that is coming, it will be an open and shut case. I will get a judgment against you for hundreds of thousands of dollars. I will garnish Frank's Social Security. I will put a lien on this house. I will leave you with absolutely nothing. Susan turned pale. You would not. We are your parents. I was your daughter, I corrected her. But you treated me like a bank. So now I am acting like a bank. And I am foreclosing. I stood up and looked down at her. But I will give you one chance. One way to avoid the lawsuit. What, she whispered. You are going to list this house for sale tomorrow, I said. You are going to sell it. You are going to use the proceeds to pay me every single cent you owe me plus the cost of repairing my RV. Then you are going to take whatever is left and move into a small apartment. A cheap one. The kind of place you thought was good enough for me when I was starting out. But where will we go, she sobbed. This is our home. I looked at the empty spot on the driveway where my RV used to be. I do not care, I said. Figure it out. Or do not. If you do not list the house by Friday, my lawyer files the suit on Monday. I turned and walked away. I did not look back at my mother crying on the lawn. I did not look at Kayla sitting on the curb. I walked to the end of the street where I called a new Uber. The ride to the hotel was quiet. I booked a suite at the Marriott. A nice one. I ordered room service. A steak and a bottle of expensive red wine. I sat by the window looking out at the city lights. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Kayla. I am leaving him. I am going back to my parents in Ohio. I am sorry, Harper. I didn't know they were stealing it. I just wanted a home for the baby. I looked at the message. I believed her. She was just another victim of the Rossi charm, another woman convinced that she had to sacrifice herself for a mediocre man. Get out while you can, I texted back. And name the baby something strong. Do not name him after his father. I took a sip of wine. The liquid was dark and rich. It tasted like freedom. I had lost my family that day. But looking at my reflection in the window, I realized I had found something much more important. I had found my self-respect. And that was worth more than any house on wheels. The house sold in 3 weeks. It was a seller's market and the location was desirable, so Susan did not have to wait long to liquidate the last symbol of her false status. I did not go to the closing. My lawyer handled everything. He ensured that the proceeds were held in escrow until my lien was satisfied. The check I received was for $67,000. It covered the damage to the RV, the stolen medical equipment, the legal fees, and every single penny I had lent Jared over the last 5 years. It was a lot of money, but when I held the cashier's check in my hand, I did not feel rich. I felt reimbursed. I felt like a contractor who had finally been paid for a job that had gone on far too long. Susan called me the day she moved out. I almost did not answer, but curiosity got the better of me. She sounded smaller. Her voice lacked the theatrical quality it usually had. She told me they had found a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex near the highway. It was on the 2nd floor and there was no elevator, which was going to be hard for Frank's knees. She told me the neighbors were loud and the carpet smelled like cat urine. I listened to her complain for 5 minutes. I listened to her wait for me to offer to help. She paused, expecting me to say that I would send a cleaning crew or buy them a new mattress. I did not say anything. I am sorry, it is not what you are used to, Mom, I said finally. But it is what you can afford. She hung up on me. It was the last time we spoke. The legal system moved slower than the real estate market, but it was just as unforgiving. Jared did not get bail. With his prior record and the flight risk established by his plan to sell the vehicle out of state, the judge ordered him held until trial. He eventually took a plea deal to avoid a potential 10-year sentence. He pleaded guilty to grand larceny and fraud. He was sentenced to 30 months in state prison, followed by 3 years of probation. I went to the sentencing. I sat in the back row. I needed to see it. I needed to see the moment when the golden child realized that the world was not going to bail him out. Jared looked back at the gallery when the judge read the sentence. He looked for Frank. But Frank was not there. Frank had taken his own plea deal. In exchange for testifying against the locksmith who had illegally bypassed my security system, Frank pleaded down to a misdemeanor conspiracy charge and assault. He avoided jail time due to his health and age, but he was sentenced to 2 years of house arrest and community service. The irony was poetic. The man who had tried to steal my mobile home was now confined to a cheap apartment he hated, unable to leave the premise without permission from a parole officer who was half his age and female. He had lost his reputation, his home, and his freedom. The neighbors he tried so hard to impress now knew him as the man who stole from his own daughter. I got my RV back a week after the arrest. The police had finished processing it for evidence. I hired a professional biohazard cleaning crew, the kind that cleans up crime scenes. I told them to strip it down. They removed the ruined carpet and replaced it with hardwood. They replaced the scorched sofa. They sanitized every inch of the ventilation system. It cost $12,000, but I did not care. I needed to scrub the Rossi DNA out of my sanctuary. When the work was done, I walked inside. It smelled like lemon and fresh wood. It did not smell like smoke. It did not smell like betrayal. I ran my hand over the new counter. I opened the new safe I had installed, which was now bolted to the chassis with military-grade hardware. I placed my new ultrasound machine inside. I had bought a better one with the settlement money. I sat in the driver's seat and started the engine. The rumble of the diesel motor felt like a heartbeat. It was strong and steady. I realized then that I had been afraid to leave. I had been afraid that if I drove away, I would be abandoning the only people who were supposed to love me. I thought that if I stayed close enough and paid enough, eventually they would see me. But they never saw me. They only saw what I could provide. I put the RV in gear and drove out of the storage lot. I did not look back at the town where I grew up. I did not drive past the apartment complex near the highway to check on my parents. That part of my life was a closed chapter. 3 months later, I was in Montana working a contract at a rural hospital near Glacier National Park. The mountains were jagged and beautiful, covered in snow that looked like powdered sugar. I was sitting in my RV drinking coffee and watching a herd of elk graze in the meadow outside my window. My phone buzzed. It was a picture message from Kayla. It was a photo of a baby boy. He had dark hair and eyes that looked like mine. She had named him Leo. "He is safe," the caption read. "We are in Ohio. My dad got me a job at his hardware store. I am filing for divorce next week." I smiled. I typed back a quick reply. "He is beautiful. Tell him his aunt is a badass." I then went into my banking app. I set up a trust fund for Leo. It was a small monthly contribution that would compound over 18 years. But I put a strict clause on the account. The money could only be accessed by Leo himself when he turned 21, and only if he could prove he was employed or enrolled in school. No parents allowed. I would help the next generation, but I would not enable another Jared. The sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. I finished my coffee and washed the mug in my clean sink. I had a 12-hour shift starting at 7. I had lives to save. I had a purpose. People often tell us that family is everything. They tell us that blood is thicker than water, and that we have a duty to forgive and forget. But they forget that blood is also what attracts sharks. They forget that sometimes the family tree is rotten from the roots up, and the only way to save the fruit is to graft it onto something new. I learned that self-respect is not a renewable resource. You have to protect it. You have to build walls around it. And sometimes you have to prosecute the people who try to steal it. I am still a travel nurse. I still live in my RV. But now when I look in the rearview mirror, I do not see a victim. I see a survivor. I see a woman who reclaimed her territory. And most importantly, I see a road that belongs entirely to me. If you have family members who drain you dry, do not wait until they break into your home to set a boundary. Change the locks now. Secure your assets. And remember that no is a complete sentence. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to support the channel. If you think I did the right thing by suing my mother, leave a comment below. And if you know someone who is being taken advantage of by their family, share this video with them. It might just give them the courage to take back their keys.